to Collectors. I'm Kent Lund. If you had a metal detector and you went into the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, next stories are going to be all about Michigan. It's all be about copper mining. What kind of things would you dig up? Next on the Collectors. Jim, thank you again for allowing us in your house to see your collection.
Glad to have you.
And it's going to be all copper mining equipment, tools, and things you found on site at the old mines in the Upper Peninsula.
Not all things I've found,
Okay.
but most of them. I've been digging relics up there for about 45 years now.
Okay,
And in that time, we've come up with a few interesting tools and that sort of thing.
I'll say.
Fella I used to visit up there, he calls me the Iron Man because I'm the only one interested in the old iron. Everybody else is looking for minerals.
Oh, copper and old copper, yeah.
So we'll do a little bit of history on Michigan first, so you get some understanding of what copper's doing there. Jesuit missionaries that came into the area in the 1600s, I think, found copper. The Indians had copper there, and what they had was what we call float copper. And float copper are just big copper nuggets. It's solid copper. But it wasn't found in the rock. It was found on the stream beds and on the lake shore, and it was leftovers from the glacier.
Okay.
So it didn't tell them where the copper was. But the real early Indians in the area, 500 to 1,000 years ago, were actually mining it.
Actually digging in the ground.
And that's what the earliest mines were opened on. They were opened on Indian pits.
Just a large hole.
Right.
Okay.
Well, Michigan became a state in 1837, and it was due to what we call the Toledo War. When they established Ohio kind of did a sloppy survey, and they carefully got the mouth of the Maumee River and the port of Toledo included in theirs. If the survey had been done right, it would have been Michigan property. Well, we took umbrage. We got our militia together, go down there and take it back. Well, Ohio got their militia together, and there was somewhat of a disagreement. It's rumored that someone was cut with a penknife. But at any rate, the president solved the problem by giving Michigan the Upper Peninsula and letting Ohio keep the Toledo Strip. So we've got this big piece of land, half again as much land as we had originally. We should take a look at it. And we sent our resident geologist up there, Douglas Houghton.
Douglas Houghton?
Douglas Houghton. He was our geologist at the time, and he was sent up there to find out whether these rumors of copper amounted to anything. And his 1841 report was tempered with the fact that if you're going to make money with copper up here, you're going to have a lot of money to begin with. It took a lot of capital to run a hard rock underground mine. Well, that didn't stop the get-rich-quick characters. They all ran up there to see if they couldn't just gather enough up to make a living. It didn't work out, but eventually somebody did find an outcropping of copper that paid. And it was called the Cliff Mine, and it was opened on what we call a mass. A mass mine is a mine that's producing large chunks of copper, thousands of pounds apiece. And these pieces of copper had to be cut up. They were too big to get out of the mine. And
so I bet they had a tool for that.
They had a tool for that, and we have one here. This is called a Cape chisel. It's about 1.5 inches wide piece of 1/2-inch stock, made from a piece of drill stock. This is octagonal drill stock. They bought it from England. It was good steel. Blacksmith forged it down to 1.5 inches by 1/2, broadened the point out to about 3/4 of an inch, and they used this edge to cut chip after chip, and this is one of the copper chips from cutting. They would cut thousands of these until they cut through that mass of copper and reduced it to a size they could handle.
So that's like a wedge.
Well, it's just a chip of copper. This is the previous cut surface. It's all wrinkled, and the smooth cut is the last cut.
Oh, okay.
And these chisels came in different lengths depending on how big a piece they had to cut through. That's a short one. Longer ones were 3 or 4 feet long.
Is this something, Jim, that you found with your,
That's something I found,
You
yeah.
dug
That
up?
was at the Cliff Mine.
so just so I know, you're wandering around the property
Right.
and you get,
I get a signal in this 4 inches of pine needles and junk, and
okay, and you dig with a shovel and
now,
that's what
now
you came up with?
typically, I don't like to hunt in the spoil piles where the trap rock is, because it's acidic and it really corrodes the heck out of these pieces,
Okay.
and they're in bad shape. But other pieces, like this hook, this is the back of a large hook that was used to pull the chain and out of the shaft, right?
I'll be darned.
And it's actually hand forged. That was actually beat out of red hot steel by hand. You can see all the hammer marks in it.
That's why the blacksmith said that didn't have to go to work out there. Arms were-
I didn't have to work out. They worked out on a daily basis.
yeah.
That's about 2.5 inches in diameter where it snapped off. I wouldn't want to have been at the bottom of the shaft at that time. And this is another relic from hauling up the ore. This is an eye of what they called a kibble. And a kibble was a big bucket. Looked like a 3-minute egg. Looked like an egg with the top cut off. This is an eye that would have been riveted onto one side, another one on the other side, and heavy chain, like this hoisting chain, would have been used to pull that bucket out, dump out the old
I noticed
trap
there's some
rock.
wear on that chain. That chain has been used and used and used.
It's been, yeah, very used. A lot of times this outer surface from dragging along the rock and the
Okay.
pulleys will get thinned out quite a bit.
Now, Jim, what town what area were most of the copper mines? Was that Houghton area? Ishpeming?
You're above Hancock. Hancock is on the north side of Portage Lake, and it's in Keweenaw County.
Okay.
Okay, Keweenaw County is where most of the original mass mines were. There were some down in Rockland. One of them was the Minnesota mine, spelled Minnesota because the fellow that did the incorporation papers couldn't spell Minnesota. Pronounced Minnesota, spelled Minnesota. And that mine produced a piece of copper that was over 40 feet long. It took them 1 year and 3 months to cut it into pieces and get it out of the mine. And they were still happy to get it. Yeah, huge masses of copper. This is the biggest piece that I've found. This one here weighs 17 pounds, and it's a rather ugly thing. Cleaned up, you'd see the copper. There's a little bit of what they call trap rock adhering to it. This is another piece. And this is the nice pure copper that's inside that.
Now I know that when they started doing a mine and digging down and going very deep, they had things so the miners could see what they were doing, right?
Right,
Are these carbide lamps?
Now these are later lamps. We're talking about the black powder era at
Okay.
the Cliff Mine. They didn't have carbide.
Oh, they
They
didn't?
didn't have electric. What they had was candles
Oh my God.
and candlesticks, which probably used as a weapon from time to time. Rather offensive looking little thing.
But you'd stick that in a beam or
You would stick it in a beam, you had a little hook on it, you could hang it, but it would not be worn on their cap
Okay.
because you're working with a candle and you'd be moving your head all the time and your candle would burn up in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Something they could wear on their cap is this little thing called a oil wick lamp. An oil wick lamp has a thick fluid in it. I believe Standard Oil marketed a fuel for that called Sunshine, and a lot of times you'll see these referred to as a sunshine lamp.
Okay.
It's an oil wick lamp properly. And if you had to re-wick that thing, you would take a bunch of string, wrap it around something numerous times, take it off, fold it up, fold it over, and tie a little string onto the end of it. In the middle of it, actually, like so. Tie a little piece of paper or something to the other end of it, and you'd put that little piece of paper in line with the spout, a little extra string in there with it so it can go out.
And this is all to get started for your day of work.
And this
in
is
the
what
mine.
you do to re-wick the lamp. You just blow in there,
Oh.
Until that comes out, dump your wick in,
Nice idea.
and there you are. That's
Nice
how you
idea.
re-wick, because you had to do that fairly often. That wick would burn up.
In the mines in Michigan's Upper Peninsula, was there ever a gas situation where they'd have canaries?
Good question, but they didn't use canaries. They didn't have a gas problem. This was all hard rock. The only gas generated was from rotting timber.
Oh,
So there was very little gas problem. They were self-ventilating. Even nowadays, you go in them, there's air movement in there constantly,
okay.
even though most of them are pretty well
I
sealed
know they
up.
pumped water from them too, did they?
I had a lot of problem with that. I got an item here. This is one that I found. Strange looking thing. I didn't know what it was when I found it. They had
Now,
had,
you dug this out of the ground?
yeah, they'd had a mineral weekend and they bulldozed a spoil pile.
A
Then
spoil
they had the
pile,
rock collectors come in and look for
and a spoil pile is waste
what
piled
they
up.
call trap rock or waste rock.
Okay, okay.
Okay, there's huge piles of it up there. So they would bulldoze that pile.
So
Mineral
open it up.
collectors come in on Labor Day weekend, it was.
Oh.
They kick these things around because they're iron. Nobody wants iron. They're looking for minerals.
Okay.
So I found this. I'd never seen anything like it, and I'm wondering what it is. I had two of them. I took one home, and I finally figured it out. This is a check valve for one of their pumps for dewatering the mine. It was made with leather all the way out to the outer edge, sandwiched between these two plates, and brought up around this nice rolled back. Then that would have been bolted to the pump.
Oh,
It would have used the leather as a hinge, and it would constantly rise and fall. And that was the check valve for the pump to dewater the mine.
Iron
A
check
very
valve.
old one. And this was just thrown out when that leather wore out because these rivets are not removable. So whenever that leather finally wore out, they'd throw this away, put another one in.
and you found it.
Yeah.
I'll be darned.
But to do the drilling and the actual blasting up there, this typical starter drill, it's short. And since they're drilling by hand with a hammer that's between 6 and 9 pounds, there's a typical drill hammer. And that would be swung uphill when they're mining. What they would do is they would follow the ore body lays like a sheet of rock on about a 45-degree angle, right up through the whole copper range. It lays on an angle. They run a shaft right down that ore body, following the ore body.
Okay.
Then they run levels. Every so many feet they run a level. A level is what you search for the ore in. You're looking for good ground that has copper. When you get to it, you mine upwards. They'll lay little tracks in there. They'll have little tram cars so they can move the ore. And they will take these hand drills on a 45-degree angle
Oh my
and
God.
drill upward. If you've ever pounded a nail in the ceiling with a 2-pound hammer.
And this is 10 or 12
And
pounds.
this is 6 to 9 pounds.
6 to 9.
Yeah, that's what I typically dig. These are all old drill hammers.
And are any of those made in East Jordan, Michigan, where they have an iron
Well,
smelting?
they were made in some foundry where they could cast steel.
Got it. Okay, steel.
And steel was hard to come by back then. But these are cast in a mold that has an iron end on either end of the cavity for the handle, or for the head, is iron, and it will cool the end of that casting. And it's what they call a chill. And chilling the end of that iron casting causes it to harden. And if
Okay.
you look at these, here's one that the chilled end is partially broken off of. That hammer was no good at that point. If they continue to use it, you'll end up with this.
Mushroom.
Yeah, it's soft now.
Okay.
But the drill hammer has a hard end on it, or it wouldn't last any length of time. Because they're constantly pounding on this drill steel. The guy holding the drill is turning it about 1/8 of a turn every time it's struck. And believe it or not, his signal to stop drilling is to put his thumb over the end of the drill.
No, thank you.
Well, like hitting a baseball, you keep your eye on the ball.
Okay.
So the guy with the hammer's always got his eye on the impact point. And if
Okay.
you put your thumb there just after it gets struck, it's not dangerous.
Got it.
Besides that, if you did hit your thumb, you'd probably pull a drill out of the hole and hit him over the head with it. So
Yeah. And I
there's
noticed,
some incentive.
I know this isn't copper mining necessarily, but you have several hatchet and axe heads
These are all old axes that I've dug up there.
dug up in the ground.
This one is particularly interesting. It shows how accurate they got with a sledgehammer, or what they call a striking hammer. This guy hit that little drill every time, all
Wow.
day long. So when he's splitting his wood with a double bitted axe, that would have been my choice for a wood wedge, but he hit it right on the money.
Yeah.
Another
Yep.
thing that they did, they seem to use all these axes. Every one of these has been severely pounded on.
It's been used for splitting.
Used them for splitting wood.
Right,
That's
sure.
what they had to heat the house with.
Sure.
Even this one, which is down to just that much of the blade, has still been used as a wedge.
Now I'm curious, Jim, when you get a signal, and you've done this for years, so are things a foot and a half in the ground, or 6 inches, or?
Metal detectors are better than what I started with now, and you
Okay.
can detect things quite deep. But here's what you got to ask yourself.
Yeah.
At my age,
Yeah.
I'm not going to be digging too many 2-foot deep holes in roots and that sort of thing.
No, right, sure.
So I use a cheap metal detector, and I'm just looking for the bigger pieces.
What is the most unique thing you found in here that you were kind of surprised you found
Well-
on a dig?
It's not here anymore, but one of the best things I ever found is now in a museum up in Eagle River.
Okay.
Okay, and it was part of the original head frame pulley from the original shaft of the first mine to make any money mining copper. Very historical item, big hunk of iron, but it was a head frame pulley when they were still using chain like this to hoist the rock out of the mine. And that pulley has these chain link marks worn deeply into it, and you can see where the chain sometimes rolled over and wore a little bit. There's like 4 tracks in there.
So do you suppose that it wore enough that they decided it's unsafe and they just took it down and
No.
set it aside?
And I'll tell you why I don't think they did that.
Okay.
Because it was broken into a nice big hunk. It had come loose and gone down the shaft. I can pretty well guarantee it.
Oh my God.
It hit the bottom and shattered, being cast
Which is
iron.
one reason why mining is so dangerous.
And they threw it out with the spoil.
Got it, okay.
The number one killer in the mines was not falling down the shaft. That was number 2. Number 1 was getting crushed by falling rock. And if you back up here a little bit,
Sure.
I'll show you another tool.
You're like your normal collector. You don't have much room for anything but your collection. I get it.
Yeah, this is called a loose bar. It has a little tapered end on it that's straight, and on the other end, you've got a pry.
It looks like a crowbar to me.
And this is the biggest safety tool they had. They would go in after blasting, and they'd take this bar, and they would pound on what they called the hanging wall or the ceiling. And if the bar rang, they knew what to listen for. They knew that rock was tight. But if you got a dull thud, then they'd be looking around for some kind of a crack in that rock that they could bar down.
Got it.
And the
okay.
first thing they did when they came in the morning, because you blasted at the end of the shift, all that black powder smoke has to have time to clear. So the last thing you do is light your fuses and get out. In the morning you go in with your loose bar, you check the ceiling, you bar down any of the loose, and then you start moving that rock downhill. Remember, we were mining uphill? The reason we mined uphill instead of downhill is because that gravity is going to help you remove that rock.
Okay.
And as hard as it is to drill uphill, it's still better than trying to move all that rock out of there.
And what was this tool called again?
Called a loose bar. That's what they called it. There are other names in other mining districts, but in the Keweenaw,
Okay.
we brought the Cornish over here to do the mining.
The ones that brought the pasty.
Cornish mines, right, well, the ones that brought the pasties, but I got to tell you, the Finns made them edible. Cornish pasties are just meat and potatoes.
Yes, they are.
The
They're
Finns put
basic.
the rutabaga in there, and that's what
And salt
gives
and
it-
pepper,
that's
which
what
is
gives
the
it
only
flavor.
seasoning they ever used.
So at any rate, the Cornish mines were getting pretty sparse, and they were mining what they called an ore. Now, we don't call the rock that we mine the copper out of in the Kewah, or we call it trap rock, because it traps the copper. Ore is a mineral that they get the copper out of. It'll be a sulfide or an oxide of copper. And there it has to go to Wales, and the gnomes of Swansea would reduce it to copper.
Oh, yeah.
Well, there's extra money there. So their mines are running out, they're getting deep. They got to pay for refining. And we're cutting pure copper, never been done before. This has really never been done before. This tool here saw its first service in that line of business at the Cliff Mine, because they never had to cut copper to get it out of the mine before. So that is a real bottom line tool.
And it's funny you mentioned
From that mine.
You mentioned the pasties. My family's from Ishpeming, my father,
Okay,
and my mother made pasties.
Iron Man.
And there was always a discussion at the dinner table if you include rutabaga or not include rutabaga, because one nationality did, one didn't, one was original, one wasn't, and they wrapped them in something and put them in a lunchbox and took them down in the mine, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And they'd be hungry after doing this,
Oh,
I
yeah.
guarantee you
Well,
that.
they're a hearty meal. I buy these little ones and I eat half of the thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Is there a particular item here that nobody else has ever seen, or they see them very rarely, or?
Yes. Yes, there is. Back up a little bit. This is one that I found at the Cliff.
The Cliff Mine, which is located near.
And that is, it's located, Cliff Town used to be on the map till late 60s, I believe. A little town called Cliff.
I'll be
There
there.
wasn't a single building there. Nothing.
I'll be there.
But they kept it on the map because there's so little up there. They had nothing else to do with
before
it.
you talk about that for a second, let me, because I'm interested in your way of collecting. In other words, how you find things.
Well,
So when you go to a small town where there's no buildings left, you're looking at a map, it should be here. You start looking for relics that would give you a hint that there's
what I
something
look for, it's a good question. What I look for is old apple trees.
there. Okay.
That's where the houses were. First thing you did when you built your house, you planted apple trees, free food. So there's apple trees all over up there.
Okay.
You'll see what I mean if you drive around
Yeah.
up there. And at the town sites or the house sites, you'll find the mining tools, because they would take them home with them.
Okay.
And I've found all of my best tools, really, other than that head frame pulley piece and that part of the pump, in the town sites.
Okay.
This is also found in the town site, and this is the unique tool. Don't have any historical proof of what this was used for.
Okay.
But I found this at the Cliff Mine. It's an ugly little ladle. Never had any more of a handle on it than that. It was used by the blacksmith. He would pick it up with his tongs and put it in his duck's nest and heat it up. But I believe what this was being used for, because it has silver in it. When I first cleaned it up, I thought it was Babbitt for pouring bearing.
Yeah, I was just going to.
Would have been, you know,
Or
common.
lead. Or,
Yeah, but probably Babbitt because it was quite hard. This is what happened when they found silver in the mine. They would find pure silver married to copper. Pure copper married to pure silver. Absolutely bonded to it, but not as an alloy. And they would cut that silver off. They'd take that home with them if they could. That was the game. If the foreman caught him, he took it home with him. But most of the silver went home with the miners.
So it was a byproduct that they would put in their pocket, and when they checked out that day, hopefully get home with it.
Right.
And then sell
They
it.
would take something home, and there was a broker, I think in one of the books I read, he came up about every 3 months and he would buy the silver.
Okay.
So, you've got some silver knobs on this thing. The first thing you're going to do, let me get one other tool here.
I got to be careful.
Yeah, you got to be careful where you walk. This is one that I found at a cabin site, where I also found a piece of copper with silver cut off it. This is a cold chisel. It's not a mining tool. This is a blacksmith tool. But it was used, and you can see the marks on that piece of copper
Sure.
where they cut off the silver.
With
Well,
a cold chisel.
Right, with this chisel. You can see where they folded the end. They held it in a vise. You can actually see the marks. And
Yeah.
the miner would cut that silver off. Then there's a lot of silver there that you're going to get some copper with.
This is
You
heavy.
don't want to throw it out, But you're going to have some copper with it, and you're going to get a problem with the broker. He's going to say, well, you know, there's 30% there. You're going to say, there's more than 10%.
Yeah, I gotta,
Going to be an
a little horse
argument over,
trading.
yeah, over how much silver is in that. This ladle comes in at that point. And I think what they were doing, because I've talked to 2 other diggers up there that both had ladles like this, one of them with a 1/2 inch of silver still in it. He'd put that in his duck's nest and he'd heat that thing up to 1800 degrees or better. At 1800, silver melts. But the copper doesn't melt till 2000. So they could easily, and I've talked to blacksmiths, they say they could easily melt that off, pour it out, copper goes out the window, you don't want to get caught with that. And evidently, that's how they were, that's how they were refining that.
That's really something.
So let's
So that is a unique tool.
put these 2 back if you would.
Yeah, there's silver in there.
Yeah, that's not an official explanation. But
I'll buy
that's
it.
what I think.
I'll buy it.
That's what I think they were doing. I can't think of any other
buy it.
reason they would be melting that silver. Now, I was up there 2 weeks ago, and I dug this up. This is another unique tool. I've got a friend up there who was a geologist for the mines. He's never seen one. He's dug a lot of iron himself. And this is a wedge. If you can see how that's made, it's straight to here, and the rest of it is tapered, and it weighs a metric ton. It's a heavy piece of steel. What happens when they're blasting this copper ore out, that copper will hold the rock together. Well, it's like rebar. You gotta get that apart somehow, and the only way they had to do it was to spread that rock until it broke. This whole shelf is full of nothing but wedges. It was a very common problem up there. This is another big wedge, and it looks like a wood splitting wedge.
Yeah, it does. It does. You probably could use it for that.
Yeah, used for
Probably
the same purpose. This is a standard Michigan Lake Superior pattern, as they call it in the catalogs, mining pick. It's not used like a coal pick. It's not swung against the rock. These were used the way they're built, with a real heavy eye. They were held against the rock with a handle. 2 guys with hammers would beat on them, and that would break the rock. It was used just like a wedge or a moil to split the rock. But when you see picks used in the copper mines up there, they weren't swung. They were probably used a lot to grab the rock and pull it down. Yeah, to handle it.
Terrific.
Or to split it by hammering. All of these are hammered on quite severely, and the points are usually fairly dull.
Okay, beautiful.
This tool right here, called a mucking spoon, was ordinarily about 2 feet longer than this. This long opening was probably used to put the clay in the blast hole. When they had drilled and put their charge of powder in, if they didn't put something behind it to resist the blast, it would just blow out like a gun barrel. Wouldn't do anything at all. So they would put powdered clay in there, put it in the hole, dump it in, take it out, and then they used another tool
To tamp it?
which we have here. I've only dug one. I've only seen one, as a matter of fact. But this is a tamping bar, and it has a little single groove in it, and that would clear the fuse. Because you've already got your powder charge in, and you've got your fuse in it when you put the clay in. So you got to have a little groove to keep from damaging the fuse, and that would be used to pack that clay in the hole.
Sure. Makes sense. Well, Jim, we're really happy to see all this unique things that you dig out of the, for the most part, you dug this out of the ground.
Yeah, most of these are dug.
We appreciate it. The collectors appreciate
Okay.
it. Thanks, Jim, very much.
You bet.
Thanks for watching The Collectors. I'm Kent Lund. And if you have any questions or you want to ask Jim a question, you can contact me at bctv, the collectors, @gmail.com. Thanks again.